Hi everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. So today's video, I want to talk to you more about a symbol in the astrology charts that I feel is very misunderstood, that we're lacking a lot of depth when it comes to integrating this archetype into our lives. And I'm talking about the symbol of Chiron in our birth charts. And I really think that we are missing a tremendous amount of understanding and wisdom from this symbol in our chart, because a lot of the information that we have available to us is very superficial. It's just the kind of language and the words around it, but none of the actual wisdom of lived experiences where somebody's Chiron has been speaking deeply to them in their psyche and their worldview and helping them deeper understand their own internal emotional reality and the journey that they're on individually. Because Chiron itself is not a surface orientated symbol. It's not about oh, this is my personality trait. It's not about that at all. I think that's maybe why, to a certain degree, a lot of us are unable to tap into the depth of Chiron, because I feel that the information that we have available to us, as I've said, is kind of like lacking. There's a scarcity and deep, real emotional transformational experiences from people. And there are astrologers that are talking about Chiron in this kind of context, which is great. But for me today, I really want to talk to you about a couple of things that I think is really important to start considering when looking at Chiron as well. I also want to talk to you about the workshops that I've been talking about. I'm finally ready to that you guys have access to them. So in the description over here, you will see a link to be able to read about the 3 different types of workshops that I am doing at the moment. And I would love to have you come join me. There are already a few people, or actually, there's already quite a lot of people that have secured their spots in it. And this is something that I'm very excited to share. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this video too. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so the first thing that I want to introduce over here that I think is really important to start thinking about with Chiron is, which is ironic here in this moment, because you're going to hear what I'm going to say, is that you can't actually think your way through Chiron. Chiron and Chiron experiences are not intellectual. They're deeply somatic, they're sensory perception. And when you come into understanding the emotional awareness that comes from your Chiron wound, you will start to have you'll start to understand that these experiences are very different. The emotional awareness that comes from understanding your wound over a period of time starts to influence and shape the way that you see reality and what you consider to be important and not. And that's a big thing that you need to understand about Chiron. And the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of the information out there, again, as I said, because it's lacking that emotional wisdom that comes from lived Chiron experiences, a lot of people will just regurgitate the same language, like it's the wounded healer, Chiron is the rejection mechanism. But when you actually get into the nitty-grittiness of what we're talking about here, it's a completely different story. So you need to firstly recognize that the Chiron signature in your chart has to do more with awakening deep somatic insight and an emotional awareness that is held within the body. Okay. Another thing that I think is really important to consider and to actually understand, I would actually say to understand rather than to consider, is that we're only looking at Chiron individually in the chart. And while you can get a tremendous amount of understanding, in fact, that's one of the workshops, is you can get tremendous understanding of what it is that your Chiron is trying to do in your chart. It's deeply empowering and deeply helpful to also understand its role in relationship to Uranus in your chart and Saturn in your chart. Because most people now, right, will be experiencing the sort of limitation, the emotional limitation from Saturn, the wounded sensitivity of Chiron, and the fragmentation of Uranus in their lives. As in Saturn revealing where there are emotional limitations, the fear of growing up, the fear of establishing one's sense of authority, the Chiron experience of just being trapped in the woundedness and feeling unseen and rejected and rejecting yourself, pretty much. And then the Uranian experiences where loads of things will happen in your life and you won't actually understand that a large part of these fractured experiences are buried in your subconscious, and your psyche is trying to push them to the surface for you to reintegrate them. So when you look at all different cultures and civilizations, you'll see that there's always an underlying transformational story or mechanic that we as human beings are undergoing. And it's about integrating the psyche and having our perception almost rebirthed. And Chiron is a facilitator for psychological and emotional rebirth. But it's in many ways, we're not even coming into that conversation or seeing the potential and the possibilities of these things, because psychological and emotional rebirth must include the dimensions of the conscious self, which is the emotional fixed reality that you have here, the relationship to what is emerging from the unconscious into the conscious mind, and then the Chiron piece, which sits between the conscious and unconscious and regulates the way that we actually experience these two things. It's literally Chiron speaks Saturnian and it speaks Uranian, and then it crosswires between the two. So it's very important to understand your Uranus in your chart and your Saturn in your chart and what those emotional dynamics are about for you to sort of see how Chiron facilitates that. And another thing that stops us from being able to deeply understand Chiron, unfortunately, is that we're trapped in the emotional displacement of the wound. Meaning that we take this idea of the wounded healer, most people, in terms of just running with the idea of it rather than the emotional experience of it, and we think that we are appointing ourselves the healer role. And that's not the case. Chiron experiences are initiations into deep dark night of the soul moments. And through that emotional transformation, as well as the experience of skills that you've learned along the road, you actually come into an initiation of some form of healing experience, which is very different. So just the process of having to recognize that Chiron healing processes are brought to you and then you're initiated into them is a very different perspective of coming into and saying, oh, I've got to heal my Chiron. It just doesn't work like that. And you don't even heal your Chiron. You can't. It's a fundamental wound that's there. The last thing that I'll say is that when we look at Chiron, we're trying to place it within different signs. Is Chiron associated with Virgo? Is Chiron associated with this? And of course, a large part of this confusion or the sense of this is where I think it belongs. And I think we're on the right track with that. So don't get me wrong. I think we're on the right track with that. But one of the things that's really interesting to me is that we often see the Chiron experiences with like illnesses, or then we correlate it to like medical, like the enhancements in medicine and anything to do with healing in healing arts, which is the truth, right? But something interesting that I want to bring here is that do we also see the correlation that when we're unable to transmute the emotional material within our in our conscious self, and where that fragmentation is existing in the unconscious self, when we can't like transmute our life experiences and our emotional dilemmas, it forms crystallized dis-ease. And that fracturedness and emotional unconnectedness, unintegratedness causes this disease. And then we have this disease, and then we have emotional and psychological errors come into our physical form. Like our physical form is literally manifesting these emotional blocks that we have. And Chiron, when we're unable to process these emotional dilemmas because of Saturn and Uranus, we're saying, oh no, it's Chiron that's the showing us this illness. But actually, what Chiron's doing is it's revealing to us that it's not Chiron that is the sickness. It's Chiron showing us where the misintegration or disintegration is between Uranus and Saturn. So that's why I think that there's more to this archetype than just simply the wounded healer. There's more to this archetype in terms of just understanding it intellectually and then trying to will your healing into existence. It's an initiation process. And it is also an archetype that speaks deeply to the synthesis of limitations, Saturn, to emotional resilience, Saturn, from fracturing to recentering, which is a word that I got from somebody in the immersion program. So recentering, shout out to you. Recentering, which is bringing our fragmented experiences into a more centered place, so we're feeling whole. And Chiron helps us do that. So those are the things that I want us to begin to think about and start opening up to. I'm sure many of you that have been following me for some time actually have heard me talk about this in different ways. This is actually the underlying reason for these workshops at the moment. So I know that you guys have been hearing me talk about them and inviting you onto a list so that I can kind of get some ideas. And for me, these three workshops are teaching you about your Saturn. They're going to be teaching you about your Uranus, and they're going to be teaching you about your Chiron. And all three of them work together, but you can also learn about your Saturn, your Chiron, and your Uranus independently too. Okay. But the idea here is to take like the 7.5 years worth of consistent studying and understanding and wanting to share this material to you guys, but I needed to understand how it was working in my life first. And once I started to see how this formula works within myself, I'm ready to actually start teaching you how to truly understand Chiron. So what I want to do here in these workshops is a little bit different to the way that we get taught astrology. I actually want to go through a bunch of experiments with you in terms of doing like practical little experiments so that you can see the underlying principle of Saturn, so that you have a bunch of tools that you can use, that you can integrate and implement within your life. So what is the tool of Saturn? What is the tool of Chiron? What is the tool of Uranus? And this is the way that I'm going to go and teach these workshops. So if this is something that's actually interesting to you, if you're feeling called to want to actually learn practical tools on how to work with these archetypes rather than just more information, then this is the place where you're going to grow in this way. Okay. And for me, this is very important because I feel like a lot of the astrological information that we have is lacking in practicality, because once you step away from the screen, you're on your own trying to figure out your own material. Whereas if I can contribute to giving people tools that they can continue to keep using and know how to use, then you're more self-sufficient in the way that you navigate your chart, and you can actually begin to integrate these experiences within your life, your Uranus experiences, your Saturn experiences. So that's a big part of it. And I'm also going to be giving you some personalized like assignments to do so that are specific to your Chiron. So you'll be able to actually be, or Chiron, Uranus, or Saturn, depending on what types of workshops you do with me. So you can actually understand that more deeper. I have created a page with all the information on it. The link is in the description. I'm ready to go. I've already given access to so the community members from Raising Vibrations. There are going to be limited spots available because I really, really, really want to be able to be as present as possible to people. Okay, so that's the only thing I care in mind. And I don't know if I'm going to be teaching these workshops again. So those are the two things that are real for me at this point in time. Okay, so if you are sort of umming and ahhing, just take a day or whatever. But I highly encourage you to take advantage of this if you want to be able to get practical tools and go through some fun interactive experiences. The one thing that I can't stand is just having like, participating in something and then having to just listen to consistent information all the time, like we're doing this video. I want it to be interactive. So that's a big priority for me as well, is to be able to be interactive so that we can all grow and learn together regarding this material. So more information in the link. And yeah, and there are a bunch of videos there as well that's just kind of talking to you a little bit more about it in terms of the workshops. Okay. All right, my friends, thanks very much for listening to me here. I hope that you have an amazing weekend, and I'll catch you in the workshops or in another video.